Welcome to this panel where we'll be discussing what do the games we play say about the future we want. I'll be the moderator. I'm Ray Kowalchuk, a certified climate healer and a co-organizer of ECOP. I used to edit television. I recently edited the documentary The Land of Ahimsa. Many of you know my wife, Kelly Kerr, the Veganabler on Facebook. She's a food healer and is facilitating the expansion of Go Dharmic into North America. Her boss, Hanneman Das, gave a presentation yesterday. And she's here today, but not on the panel. But our son, Ethan, is. He has a degree in video game development. Video Game University, it's a thing now. It must be a sign of our times. The three of us together are starting a nonprofit to develop and promote nonviolent gaming that we call Play Nice Games. Isn't that what our mothers told us? Play nice. So we're passionate about the subject of vegan gaming, whether as a tool for outreach or simply because vegans deserve games too. Let me quickly introduce our panelists. What panel on vegan gaming would be complete without the game changer himself, Patrik Baboumian? He's been a world record holder and winner of the strongman competitions, but you may know him as the worst parking valet ever. A moment in Game Changers when he overturned a car with his bare hands. That was one of the most memorable moments in that documentary. So if anybody hasn't seen that, check it out on Netflix. The vegan community is quickly discovering that Patrik is also a game dev. He's developing an action video game featuring activists freeing animals from their exploitation in fur farms and science labs. We hope that those attending VCOP saw his presentation yesterday. If not, we have a recording of that session and this one up on Climate Healer's YouTube channel nearly in the future. Our other panelist, Jordi Casamitjana, has just finished his own presentation minutes ago and has agreed to stick around and talk more about his research into the overlap between gaming culture and vegan culture. What features do they have in common? What might we expect from the hybrid of vegan gaming communities? Now, do vegans play nice games? Spoiler, I already know that we don't always do that. I don't always play nice when I plug into the fantasy world and watch a lot of violence on TV and in movies. But while Play Nice Games does critique the violence in video games, it's less about it being a missed opportunity to practice something meaningful and condition ourselves to that kind of thinking that will mature our culture and climb out of some of the holes that humanity has dug ourselves into. Now, I've made some short videos exploring how the games people play can exercise our stance on environmentalism, social justice, economics, and compassion for animals.
Roughly a third of the people in the world are gamers, so a climate change video game could have a big impact. That's the idea behind Earth Games, a University of Washington lab designing games about climate and environmental science. Students have created games explaining the physics behind the greenhouse effect, or how soot is making the Arctic warm even faster.
We wanted to illustrate to the player what life could have potentially looked like if the ozone layer no longer existed. It's important that the younger generation realise they can make a difference, even if some of these environmental issues seem insurmountable. The story is not over. It's important that we remain vigilant.
Sim Earth was released in 1990 by climate scientist James Lovelock and designer Will Wright. Players create a fictional Earth, complete with geology, weather, climate systems, and even life forms. Your design choices have immediate, evidence-based impacts on how your planet functions. It was essentially a climate model in the form of a game, complete with a 200-page science manual.
Games for Change is the largest global community for people who want to use games and immersive media to make the world a better place. Every year, our growing community comes together in July for our flagship event, the Games for Change Festival held in New York City. This year's program also features the first of its kind Games and Sustainable Development Goals Summit held at the United Nations.
Daybreak is a cooperative board game about stopping climate change. You and your friends will explore a hopeful near future where you get to build the mind-blowing technologies and resilient societies we need to save the planet. Work together to reach zero emissions before you hit 2 degrees of warming or put too many of your communities in crisis.
Infinite possibilities that open up to you when you imagine your life as an open-world video game, something you play for the joy and the love of it. With one simple shift in thinking, you can completely change the experience of your life. The world becomes your game map, and wherever you decide to go, whatever challenges you're facing now, you can choose to approach it with a sense of play.
I'm a game designer. I've been making games online now for 10 years, and my goal for the next decade is to try to make it as easy to save the world in real life as it is to save the world in online games. Right now, we spend 3 billion hours a week playing online games. Some of you might be thinking, that's a lot of time to spend playing games, maybe too much time, considering how many urgent problems we have to solve in the real world. But actually, according to my research at the Institute for the Future, it's actually the opposite is true. 3 billion hours a week is not nearly enough gameplay to solve the world's most urgent problems. In fact, I believe that if we want to survive the next century on this planet, we need to increase that total dramatically. I've calculated the total we need at 21 billion hours of gameplay every week. So that's probably a bit of a counterintuitive idea, so I'll say it again, let it sink in. If we want to solve problems like hunger, poverty, climate change, global conflict, obesity, I believe that we need to aspire to play games online for at least 21 billion hours a week by the end of the next decade. No, I'm serious. I am. So we know one of the biggest problems we have in environmental sustainability is the consumption of meat. How about the Stanford research project, the cow simulator? You crawl around on the floor, and it's this really immersive world where you are a cow. And they found that people who did this for a couple minutes ate 25% less meat in the next week. Interesting, okay, because maybe you have empathy for the cow because you've done this simulator. This is where we get a little, I don't know, is this dystopian or utopian? You decide, depends on how much you like your cheeseburger, I guess. You are gonna be playing a game, eating food out of your 3D printer that is not meat. Maybe it tastes good because you've got an Oculus Rift telling you that you're eating this amazing food, and it'll have a lower carbon impact because it's just the stuff you printed out from your computer.
This story about Monopoly, a game about capitalism that was created to teach people about something completely different.
The dynamics written into the rules of this game were never intended to beat the rules. It should come with a health warning like a packet of cigarettes. You are playing a twisted version of this game.
It was supposed to be a critique of capitalism, and it turned out to be a celebration of it.
It's a cutthroat game. I only win when you lose.
And so it's a story that teaches us, compete, acquire, be ruthless, and you will go on to conquer the world. It's Monopoly through and through.
In the game, Animal Crossing, there's this owl. His name is Blathers. He runs a museum, and you can catch different fish and different bugs, and you can donate those animals to the museum, and he'll put them on display and tell you like a bunch of facts about them. Peter's made a TikTok protesting Blathers and his museum. Blathers encourages villagers to take fish out of their natural habitats so he can trap them in tiny tanks. Cancelled. PETA's Vegan Guide to Animal Crossing New Horizons. This vegan guide to it will help answer some of the tough ethical questions that it presents to give you the opportunity to help real animals while living your island life. Is fishing in Animal Crossing vegan? Sure, unlike in real life, the fish in the game don't feel pain, but fishing is harmful to animals and the planet. This is your island, and it's your job to protect it. Tearing the wildlife right out of their ocean homes so that you can, quote, donate them to Blathers for museum exhibits is not only cruel, but also bad for the environment. It's disappointing that a game in which villagers from all different species coexist harmoniously with humans encourages abusive behavior towards fish and insects. Instead of being recognized as the living, breathing, feeling individuals they are, they're presented as forms of entertainment for other villagers. Your island should be a safe space for all animals, big and small. Do clams feel pain? They also say what you can and can't wear, what you're allowed to eat and what you're not allowed to eat in the game. Is Isabel vegan?
Is PETA against Animal Crossing New Horizons? PETA hopes the game will encourage people to feel closer to the animals we share our planet with and inspire them to work to end speciesism, the misguided belief that humans are superior to all other animal species and that it's okay for us to exploit some species in horrible ways for our own trivial purposes.
Good. Now try to get to the next level. Okay, the animals should be somewhere down the corridor. Plant those cameras and get out of there.
One more security gate and we are in.
Wait, is that a neural implant? B, we can't just leave these meerkats here. Look at them.
You know the mission. Just plant the cameras.
Now that I'm here, it doesn't seem like enough.
Focus, eh? If the lab catches on, they'll find the cameras and would compromise the entire mission.
Let me free just one. Are we Earth Raisers or not?
Being an Earth Raiser means thinking strategically and playing the long game. When the public sees what's going on in the lab, they'll be outraged. The authorities will have no choice but to shut it down.
That could take years. This meerkat deserves a life without pain. Now.
We can save hundreds of lives, maybe thousands.
This guy, I will call him Miles, deserves his freedom. I hope you understand.
I don't, but I understand your conviction. Look, if anything goes wrong, this is on you.
One day, no animal will ever suffer like this again. Hang in there, Miles. We'll be home in no time. And my friend, can get that damn thing out of your head.
Damn, they got us. Get the hell out of there, eh? Go, go, go! Move! Keep moving. Damn can. Get out and as far out as you can. Hide them away.
Thanks for watching our concept trailer for Uncaged Total Liberation. To dive deeper into the world of Uncaged, visit uncagedgame.com. With your support, Uncaged will become a true game changer, fostering compassion instead of violence for the next generation of animal heroes. Let's embark on this journey together and uncage the world.
Of course, we ended with the trailer for Patrik's video game. Patrik presented yesterday and told his story, and now is an opportunity to talk a little bit more about his game, Uncaged Total Liberation.
Yeah, so to break it down, I think the shortest way to explain what Uncaged is meant to be is it really started with the idea that I was thinking about how you would use the medium of gaming the most effective way to convey the idea of animal rights and inspire compassion. And it came down to me realizing that the most powerful weapon that we have as a movement in opening people's minds is the truth itself, so to say, to say it very abstractly. If we could show the people that need to see the truth, what is actually happening to animals so that they can be made into the products that they consume, most people would probably do everything they can to stop their consumption. If they are confronted with the reality of the animal itself that is exploited, that is a very harsh thing to see. And that actually exists in the world. Direct action activists who go actually into the facilities and take video footage of what's happening in animal agriculture or in the fur industry or all these places where we exploit animals. They're taking the video footage and they're publishing it. The problem that I'm trying to solve with the game is because these videos are so gruesome, to me, they're heartbreaking. So even I, as an activist, I avoid, if I can, to watch those videos. They're really, really important and the most powerful means of communication that we have. At the same time, when I watch something like that, it really leaves me completely powerless because I have to sit down passively watching something terrible happening right in front of my eyes. And I cannot do anything for the animal that is being treated badly. So while you can go vegan after watching that video and you can change your own behavior, while you're watching it, you cannot really do anything for that individual animal. And I found it very powerful what Jordi actually said about concepts that we as humans have come up with, like a species and other categories, basically, that we have invented, against the actual real analog reality that is there, which is the individual. So when you watch an individual being put through that terrible ordeal, while you can try to change your behavior, you cannot save that individual. So I thought, how can I take what is powerful about the video and just take away basically that problem that you're sitting there passively watching it? And then I realized, well, a video game could do exactly that. So instead of watching the video, I would create a simulation of that reality. But now you're in the game. And the idea is basically you play an animal rights activist, you go into the facilities. That again comes down to me thinking the people who don't really confront that reality because they want to continue consuming animal products, if you could just take their hand and force them to go with you into a factory farming facility and force them to actually watch what's happening there, I think that would heal pretty much like 99% of them. But obviously you cannot do that. Obviously we live in a society that would forbid doing something like that. But then I thought, if I make it really appealing and I make a game that people gravitate towards because it is fun, and that is really what's important here. It can't only be made with the intent in mind to change people's minds. It has to be fun. It has to still be a game. But if I could get just that right mix so that people would play it, I wouldn't have to force them to go into the facility, because now it is their mission in the game to go into the facility, and it's actually fun, and they are playing the hero. And this is, I think, the most important part. So if you as a non-vegan watch those videos, they make you feel terrible because you feel ashamed, because you know that even those who will pretend that they don't care deep inside, they know that they're causing the terrible things that they're seeing. So they will feel bad, and it's going to be an attack on their self-image. So I thought if a non-vegan played the hero in the game, and it's them who goes into the facility and actually does something about the terrible stuff happening there, actually rescues the animals, I could completely 180 turn around the psychology of what is happening when you watch those videos. So instead of feeling ashamed, they will feel proud because it's their mission to save the animals. And if it's really realistic, there's going to be a chance that they actually make the connection and they actually get the same information, they get the same input that they would get with the video, but in a way that actually makes them feel better about themselves. And instead of shaming them into changing their behavior, the idea is that it would inspire them to change their behavior, because in the game, they are already the hero. Now they just have to make the connection and outside of the game become the hero. So when I realized all of that, if I could build something like that, that would be the most powerful tool we could have as activists to convey what we already know to those who still don't see that reality. I realized that that was much more important than anything I had ever done before. So that's how I became from the guy who flips cars and moves big weights around to the guy who is now for 3 years trying to make that game. Because if I get it right, it's going to be a really powerful tool for us as a movement. And that's Uncage.
Thanks, Patrik. That's amazing. I see lots of clapping going on in the audience. Let's get our panelists involved here. Jordi, vegans are not just compassionate, but they're passionate. Does that make us more inclined to fanaticism and nerd culture? Is this some of the things that you've observed in your article about how there's vegan communities and board gamer communities and an interesting synergy once you get them together?
Yes, I think it has to do more with the logic and consistency. For us vegans, at one point when we decided to be vegan, we did it because we wanted to be consistent. Essentially, we saw our behavior was in conflict with what we should be doing, and we just were repeating what our parents and other people tell us to do. And that was creating an effect that we didn't like. We didn't want to be connected. And in order to distance ourselves from that, we had to change our behavior. Otherwise, would that be inconsistent? Because we have a quite clear understanding of right and wrong. Our ethic brain is very intact and is being able to function. And we were born with it and we apply it. And we are shocked when we see other people looking at exactly the same thing we see and they don't change as we did. And I think board gamers have that too. Have a brain with a very kind of intact ethical element, which means very well developed to play with rules and understand when you cheat is bad, when you gain is good, when you lose. All these sort of things in other people that are not gamers might be more gray areas. The difference between right and wrong, although we think is universal, many people see them gray. And you ask a gamer or ask a vegan, they probably give you a 20-page list with very precise information. And I think this has something to do with our brain architecture. And there are some that might be neurodivergent, and that makes it even easier to have a right or wrong perception. So neurodiversity sometimes has that positive element of exploiting the part of the brain of right and wrong in a much more better way than neurotypical people might use. Others, they don't have to go that far. They just have that part of the brain more active. So I do think that there is a connection there. But doesn't mean that you won't become vegan or the other way around. It just means it's easier. It's more organic. It's less of an effort. It comes more natural.
Like the vegan community, obviously, we want to make our own rule book, right? We kind of fight over the rules. Right. Board games come with a little booklet that you fold it open. Ethan is a dungeon master. Ethan, how big are the rules in Dungeons and Dragons? We're not talking about a little booklet anymore, are we?
Yeah, there's the player's handbook, then there's the Dungeon Master's guide, and then there's 3 books just full of monsters themselves. Not to mention all the other additional rules. Like, it's not how to play Monopoly.
Expenditure is heavily on the Dungeon Master. It's pretty easy as a player, but the Dungeon Master, for anybody that doesn't play Dungeons and Dragons, is in control of the game, and they kind of are the narrator, and they role play all the other roles other than the ones that the other players are role playing themselves. So you have created a game based in a swords and sorcery, very violent kind of environment, but you're trying to infuse a bit of veganism into it. How does vegan Dungeons and Dragons work?
Trying to veganize Dungeons and Dragons is hard because, like you said, it's set in a very violent world, because the traditional way to play D&D is like you go into this cave, kill some goblins or whatever, take their gold, get experience points, and level up. That's how the game was originally intended to be played 50 years ago. And things have changed. We are trying to change that to be more inclusive, put more emphasis on the role-playing aspect, because D&D originally came from just a military simulation board game. The role-playing aspect is what made it different, and people still nowadays kind of treat it like it's a combat simulator. We were trying to change that. For example, in the Forgotten Realms, which is the world that D&D is set in, we created this underground vegan movement called the Convergence. I'll let you decide if there's any correlation to that.
Convergence, that's interesting. VCOP stands for Vegan Convergence of the People. We played the very first session of Vegan D&D 1 year ago at VCOP. And the underground movement in Forgotten Realms, we're building it into the culture of Dungeons and Dragons gamers. We're going right into their territory and bringing our veganism with them. To a medieval setting, it seems like a strange place to introduce veganism, considering our own medieval times was not very compatible with activism. But the element that makes it different is magic. Magic is something that you can define however you want, and we're going to use elements of magic to replicate an environment in which people can express their love for animals and desire to liberate them. So Jordi had mentioned that video games are getting to the point where the designer of the video game is the dungeon master. There's so many powerful tools to be able to tell stories through video games. Nobody really gets a handle on how big this industry is, but they make more revenue than all of the film industry and all of the music industry combined. And yet we don't seem to see any activism in this space. Until now, Patrick's got animal liberation right in a video game, and I think it's really going to be popular.
Yes, right now I'm developing mostly myself. I have a team of volunteers who help me with different things. But when it comes to the actual game design, it's just me. Obviously, at some point, I don't want to be alone. I want to be able to actually hire people. So I'm trying to put together a demo that I can then show potential supporters so that I can get the funding to actually hire a team. And in order to do that, you usually put together something called the V-slice, which is short for vertical slice. In games, it would be basically a demo that shows all important aspects of the game, the good idea what the finished game is going to look like. The idea was to do that in the most mass compatible way possible. So I started with a topic where there's a lot of consensus that it's wrong. You are an activist and you go into a fur farm and you're freeing foxes from the fur farm. But as the game progresses, you go more and more towards the things that are not that much consensus, which are the things that are near and dear to our hearts as vegans. Animal agriculture, it's the meat industry, it's the dairy industry. And the second clip is going to basically show the second demo level that I'm working on, which is a huge cattle factory farming facility. And the level is based on something that I've seen in 2015 when I was in the States and I was driving from Los Angeles to San Francisco. On the right side of the highway, I saw tens of thousands of cows industrially being exploited. We do have that obviously in Europe as well, but I've never seen it on that scale in real life. This level is a mini version of that, inspired by that horrific thing that I saw. And it shows the activists going near the facility and then releasing a drone, because the idea is that you have different tools with which you can document what you see. So there's different objectives that you have, like in real life. An activist might go into a facility and just take video footage, or they might actually free animals or maybe do something else. And in the game, you can also, for instance, deploy a drone, fly into the facility and take actually video footage. And that's what we're going to see.
Liquid manure container detected. Water hazard class WGK2. Animal agriculture manure, a primary source of nitrogen and phosphorus to surface and groundwater. Gathering data, video evidence, and geolocation coordinates. Ready for upload in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Upload complete.
Talk about art imitating life. That's very familiar scenery that vegans, especially who watch documentaries, are familiar with. And I've made documentaries. I'm looking for that footage of flying over the CAFOs to really show what animal agriculture is really like. You mentioned that the accessibility of this game, and I think it's exciting that their guard is down. They don't expect there to be anything to do with teaching them anything while they're playing an adventure game. We know that there's educational games, but this doesn't look like an educational game. But the education is coming.
Yeah, that's the exact idea. So it's really important to have the game hit that balance. It still has to be attractive as a game itself, because, I mean, you're not going to get the non-vegan player to play it just because it has a great message. They're going to play it because some of their friends might have told them that it's a really fun game. So you have to really measure how much of the truth you put into it. Gaming has come so far with how well it can actually simulate reality. There is already a whole genre of games and mechanics doing exactly what I want to do in Uncaged, and it's spy games. It's basically games where you play a spy, you know, like Splinter Cell or Metal Gear Solid. Those games are already out there and they're great. So I'm taking what is fun in those games, and the only thing that really changes is now you're not a super spy or whatever, but now you're an animal rights activist, but you still have those same fun mechanics, because the non-vegan is going to only play the game if it's fun. And then the truth all of a sudden, while they're not really expecting it, just jumps in their face. I think that is a very powerful moment that you can create in games.
Jordi, one of the questions in the chat was about the accessibility of games and the need for more games for children. Do you think that there's anything that would suggest an age limit on a vegan board game or video game? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I do think that it's true that we need more games for children. We humans are neotenic. Neotenia is this phenomenon in nature where once you reach adulthood, you still carry some of the infancy and juvenile characters and traits with you. And from all primates, we are the most neotenic of all. So that means when we reach adulthood, we still do many things that we did as juveniles, and that's part of why we don't have hair anymore in our bodies. There are some psychological, some biological, and playing is one of them. So playing is mostly learning to live mammals. That happens when you're a juvenile. Once you're an adult, you just play with juveniles to teach them lessons. But in humans, we are neotenic in this regard. So we're still learning our entire lives. All because our society is so complex that we can't just give up learning when we are young. We have to continue learning about the rights and wrongs and the morals issues. So that's where gaming plays a role. So therefore, yeah, games should be for all ages. But the original concept is for learning creatures, and human children are the ultimate learning creatures. But for a neotenic primate, we're still learning as adults. That means you could develop games for all ages. You could also make them appropriate for particular ages. And I think the bigger message is essential for a young human being, because you don't have to go to any extreme. You can make it very simple games where there is a big difference between cooperating and being selfish, between helping somebody be kind and being aggressive. You can teach all these simple things that are the roots of veganism. Veganism has some axioms. I identify 5 main axioms, things that we believe that are always true, such as all animals are sentient beings, or doing no harm is the right way to behave, or being non-speciesist, don't discriminate against other creatures for the species or the group they are, or being anti-exploitation, all forms of animal exploitation are cruel, or they are what I call the vicariousness axiom, which means somebody else is harming somebody, you are kind of responsible vicariousness. you are indirectly responsible for somebody else's harm because you're part of the system. You might be giving money indirectly. So it's not only you harm, it's the harm of everybody else that matters. That's why we need to change the world. We need to make it a vegan world. So all of these actions could be a game, each one for children, to teach them speciesism, to teach them compassion and do no harm. So all of these could be simplified to a single lesson or a single axiom of the vegan philosophy.
You were part of the extravaganza group, and I'm assuming that that's an adult group. And
yes.
I think the nerd culture is kind of illustrating how our society is learning how to play again as adults, and remembering that play and expressing ourselves through game and community is important. Ethan and I are playing Dungeons and Dragons at the Wishbone Animal Rights Lab in Toronto. Right now we're playing the classic games that are designed for violence, the dungeon crawler, and set up the animals and knock them down, and encounter people in the cities and steal stuff from them or kill them. But we're trying to rethink those kind of narratives. Ethan, you did a Dungeons and Dragons themed adventure. There seemed to be some pushback from the Dungeons and Dragons community about introducing veganism into Dungeons and Dragons.
I think the sad truth is veganism has negative stigma of activist thing, and people are afraid of that. So people are very defensive of their hobbies. It's not just veganism. People just love gatekeeping their interests. While Dungeons and Dragons is becoming a lot more inclusive, like it's becoming a lot more LGBT friendly, veganism's one that I think fits into it as well. People think that if we let the vegans in, they're going to take over. Like, I'm not trying to abolish all D&D and replace with vegan D&D. I just want to have that be part of it, because all activism aside, it's just fun and a different way to play Dungeons and Dragons that I think anyone would enjoy. Sure, it may be fun to play a barbarian and kill people with an axe or whatever, but that gets boring. And I think it would be a lot more fun to play maybe a barbarian trying to grapple.
You're playing a barbarian character right now.
Yeah.
The last couple of sessions for our game that we did last year, we had celebrity vegans that we based the characters upon. Who are you playing now?
Right now, I'm playing Wolf Icehammer. He is a Path of the Earthraiser, which is a subclass of barbarian we created based off of Patrick's Earthraiser comics, and I've been having a lot of fun playing him. And like I said, instead of a big barbarian with a big axe, he's a barbarian with two fists that he uses to grab people instead of attack them. A lot more focus on subduing and taking damage rather than dealing it, so he could protect others.
It's interesting because I haven't played any role-playing, except in somebody else's role-playing that remind me to be a character playing myself. So it was interesting that during the pandemic, Ian, one of the people I interviewed, a friend of mine, he's been running this role-playing group in which they created a very interesting story with activists and Pythagoreans involved. It's a mix of the Buffy the Vampire Slayer and veganism all together. During the pandemic was done on Zoom. He invited me as a master every now and then to appear as Jordi Casamitjana, the zoologist that got the legal protection, just to play myself a little bit in the game and then disappear and they carry on playing the game. So that means you could veganize role-playing by just getting suddenly in the story real things that happen in the real world with vegans and the vegan activists and all this.
Yeah, absolutely.
We got a question from Liz Gary.
Hey everyone, thank you for your wonderful work. And I have a 10-year-old grandson, and it's fascinating to me to watch him engage with his friends. They get on the phone, they get on the computer, and they're earning points, and I don't know what it's about. I'm not the gaming generation, but I see the passion and the fun and the engagement, and I just would love to see some youth focus groups come together to make the age-appropriate games for them. But yesterday, Patrick, you said something that really stuck with me. You talked about the different elements that help sink it all in, the films, the engagement, and then the playing the game. And for me, it's the music. I lead a vegan high school cooking club after school, and there was a story in the newspaper about how it was difficult to find workers to work in the slaughterhouses to kill the cows. It was a story, and I was talking about this with the students there, and the song came on the radio. It was Another One Bites the Dust by Queen. And this student started singing it and pretending that he was working on the slaughter line. Another one bites the dust, and another one gone, and another one gone. Another one bites the dust. Hey, I'm gonna get you too. Another one bites the dust. He made the connection. The kids made the connection. Who knows when it's going to happen or where it's going to come from, but I'm out there trying my best. I'm one of the million vegan grandmothers here. It warms my heart. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. Yeah, we'll get all the vegan grandmothers playing D&D. One of the things I wanted to ask Ethan about was you created one D&D adventure. What other kind of adventures for other systems might we develop for people who don't want any sort of combat?
Yeah, there's a role-playing game called Wander Home where the emphasis is entirely on the role-playing, focusing more on the beauty of the journey rather than victory, which is more so what Dungeons and Dragons is doing. It's cooperative in the sense that you play with a team, but you're still trying to beat someone else, which is typically what the Dungeon Master is throwing at you. Whereas with Wander Home, it's a lot more cooperative. It's a lot more connecting with people. It's more focused around the characters rather than fighting, defeating a villain, whatever it may be. Not to say that there might not be a villain in your Wander Home campaign, but you're not going to be killing them. You're probably going to try to persuade them. It's up to the game master in that case.
That's an important thing that I wanted to ask Patrik about was the violence in his game. It's very similar to combat games, but we saw that the character that was operating the drone wasn't armed with a machine gun. They were armed with bolt cutters.
Yeah.
And I presume they have a camera as well. These are the tools of the animal rights activists.
Yeah, exactly.
It's exciting.
There's two objectives: to document what's happening, that's your camera, and to liberate the animals, and that's the bolt cutters. Exactly. Those are the two tools through the narrative. If it's going to be a simulation of what the activist does, activists usually don't go into a facility armed, right? I thought a lot about that because that is also a reality that there might be someone who is armed who actually defends their property by shooting it. It's probably not as common these days, but I have friends who have been animal rights activists for the last 4 decades. And one of them is a Finnish friend of mine, and he has been liberating foxes from fur farms 30 years ago. I have stories of him actually going to the hospital because he was shot at with a shotgun, and they had to take all the metal pieces out of his backside. So there's a lot of adventures and stories that I've gathered over the years that I'm trying to put into the game. All these bits and pieces of reality that I'm trying to put into the narrative.
Well, your players get shot at, but the players themselves don't
not
do
armed.
Human-on-human violence, no human against animal violence. But you don't just role play humans. You have the opportunity to take down the role of animals.
Yeah, that was my way to solve the problem that if you're attacked by armed enemies, but you're unarmed and you don't really have a way to fight back.
Is there time for a question?
Yeah.
Do you have statistics on how many females play games? And also how you plan to incorporate women into your games? And how can we support you? Thanks.
When I'm playing games, it's hard to tell because I don't know every single person I'm playing with, but it's a vast majority male. But the actual statistics, when you look at it, it is actually pretty close to 50-50. It's still slightly male dominated, but it's not by as much as I would have thought. It's really comforting to know because it feels like a hobby that women are afraid to get into because, that's a guy thing. Well, no.
Yeah, I think this distortion that we might have might be because we're guys ourselves. So it's probably the case that female players tend to maybe play different games. And that way, if you're a guy, you might be in a bubble where it appears to you as if it's mainly guys, but the girls are just probably somewhere else.
I didn't organize the game, just turn up, and they were organized for everyone. And I've been to many. In my experience, there were more females than males. In the London vegan extravaganza groups, there were more females than males.
We're to the end of our time now, unfortunately. There's clearly so much more to talk about, and I think Play Nice Games wants to create more opportunities to talk and demonstrate and just get together with gamers. I think the vegans, especially activists, think that we don't have time for games. We're too serious in our lives but this is a way that we can make more meaningful games. I want to play a little video that contains some games that analyze the violence of games that we have and different kinds of games where violence is used to express animal perspective. So this is a bit of a trigger warning. Anybody that doesn't want to see it, please tune back in a few minutes. So thank you, Patrik and Jordi and Ethan, for participating in our chat today. And I'm sure we'll have plenty more to talk about.